here at the Iowa State Fair on this beautiful day, and I'm looking forward to my first corn dog here very shortly. Now, thank the Des Moines Register for doing this again. This is always a fun thing to do, and enjoy it very much to get a chance to visit with the folks here at the fair. Mention that I'm from Ames, actually, as far as background. I grew up in Alexander, Iowa, a town of 165 people on a farm outside of town. My wife and I have 3 grown children, 4 grandchildren, and now reside in Ames. But it's been an honor to represent the people of the 4th Congressional District. Before that, it was the 5th Congressional District in Northwest Iowa. But this is a great district, and with a lot of diversity, and all the way from the far northeast corner of the state, circling around Polk County down to Warren County. So it's very diverse, spread out across the state, but it's a real honor to represent this district and the great people in it. When you look at what's happening today in Washington, D.C., people are very, very concerned. I've been in the middle of a series of town hall meetings, I'm doing 27 town hall meetings during this recess, and people are very concerned about the future of the country. They're very concerned about the spending that's going on in Washington, D.C., where we have now our national debt up to about $13.2 trillion. We have a budget this year of $3.8 trillion. Almost $1.5 trillion of that is borrowed, or about 43 cents out of every dollar that the federal government spends this year will be borrowed money. It simply is not sustainable, and we cannot continue as we're going. It's very frustrating for the first time since 1974 that the Budget Act was passed, that the House of Representatives is not even going to attempt to pass a budget this year. So that there's no fiscal constraints at all as far as what is spent this next year. There's no budget, so no one is held accountable for what the priorities in spending should be this year. And again, that's the first time that's happened since the Budget Act was passed in 1974. A lot of people are very concerned, obviously, because of the spending. When you look at the stimulus bill that was passed last year, at that time it was $787 billion. We were told by the president at that time that if this bill was passed, and unemployment then was 7.5%, we were told that if it was passed, unemployment would never get above 8%. Well, as we all know, it's been 10% down to about 9.5% and holding there. The last unemployment numbers are getting worse as far as private sector jobs. And with the interest and the increased cost of the stimulus bill has gone already from $787 billion to $862 billion. With interest over 10 years, that's about $1.1 trillion of spending. And it hasn't worked, obviously, because the unemployment numbers are going up. It was basically designed only to increase the size and scope of the federal government. You have about 400,000 additional federal government employees, while the private sector has lost about 2.5 million jobs since that stimulus was passed. Folks I'm listening to at the town hall meetings are very concerned about the cap and trade bill. That's a bill that is supposed to help the environment. The studies show that if it were put in place, it would affect temperature change, climate change, by about 0.5 degree by the end of this century. So 90 years from now, it would affect temperature by about 0.5 degree. The problem with it is for Iowa, for the Midwest, is that it is a huge transfer of wealth from places like Iowa, where we're dependent on fossil fuels for electrical generation, where we have a strong agricultural base. It will increase our utility rates by 20 to 25%. In agriculture, when we look at anhydrous ammonia, primarily will increase dramatically the cost of producing that. The diesel fuel up about 50 cents a gallon, gasoline about 58 cents a gallon, and in the meantime costing Iowa about 17,000 manufacturing jobs each of the next 10 years. Nationwide, about 2.5 million jobs each of the next 10 years if in fact cap and trade is put in place. That's because we are going to lose our competitiveness with foreign countries, certainly in Iowa, with other states. It's a huge transfer of wealth from Iowa to, say, California, where they have much more geothermal, nuclear, electrical generation. And it's a boost for them, but certainly costing Iowa about $250 million a year is not something that we should be pushing. It will be devastating for agriculture, certainly with the increased costs of production and transporting our goods. When we look at this last year, the huge debate on the health care bill that was finally passed, signed into law, and I think it's interesting to step back to see how this all transpired. The Senate last year passed their bill on Christmas Eve. And at that time, it didn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat in the House of Representatives, you knew that that bill, because it was so distorted, it was so unworkable, that it would never pass the House of Representatives. The whole effort, and that's why they had the Cornhusker kickback and the Florida program with increased reimbursement for Florida rather than for Iowans. That's why those things were put in, just to buy votes so that they could get the conference between the Senate and the House. And then something happened. It was called an election in Massachusetts last year when Scott Brown won that seat running against the health care bill. And so they didn't have the 60 votes to bring a bill to the floor, so their only thing that was left to do was to pass this bill that everyone knew would not work in the House of Representatives and make that law. And that's exactly what happened with a very thin margin. The bipartisan part of that was against the bill. Most people understood what it's going to do as far as quality and access to health care, certainly in a state like Iowa where we have a lot of rural health care providers, doctors, who the reimbursement is going to be to the point, and the workload is going to be the point where they're simply going to retire. And if you're delayed as far as getting health care because you've got 20 million new people in Medicaid going into the health care system, and Medicaid pays less than even Medicare does to those providers. And a lot of doctors in my district right now are saying that they will no longer take Medicare patients simply because of the health care bill that was passed last year. It's going to be a huge problem as far as access to quality health care to those doctors that we want to keep in rural Iowa are not going to be there. And so what we're doing is piling more people into a system with fewer providers, and that's what's going to happen in the future. It also, as we try to create jobs and expand the economy, this is going to be a tremendous burden, especially on small businesses that are going to have tremendous increase in costs, new regulations. One example of that is the fact that now when a small business makes a purchase from somebody else for a product that they may need to run their business, if it costs more than $600, they're going to have to find out what that provider's tax ID number is, send them a 1099. And with this, and to enforce this, the government's going to hire 16,000 new IRS agents simply to enforce the health care bill at a cost of about $10 billion a year. It's this kind of outrageous expansion of the federal government, of IRS agents now in charge of health care, that makes so many people so angry about what, and from what I'm hearing at my town hall meetings, that they simply want this thing repealed. The mandate that is in the bill for individuals are forced now to purchase a product for the first time in history. A lot of people believe that that is unconstitutional and should be repealed. There will be, I think, with this next election, an opportunity to stop, say, the 16,000 new IRS agents by not funding them if, in fact, there is a change in the majority in Washington. I think you're going to see a set of principles, excuse me, going forward for this next election that you're going to talk about how Congress itself is going to operate. And as someone who's been around there for a while, I can tell you it is extraordinarily frustrating to know that the pieces of legislation that come to the floor of the House have been written in the Speaker's office or in Harry Reid, the Majority Leader in the Senate's office. When you look at health care, there was no hearings, there was no markup in the Senate. It was a bill that was pushed through out of Harry Reid's office. When you look at cap and trade, which will take over and change the entire economy of this country, it was written in the Speaker's office. Over 2,000 pages with an amendment put forth at 3 o'clock in the morning with 300 pages for us to vote on at 9 o'clock in the morning. Simply outrageous. No one knew what they were voting on. And to have a process like that that does away with the rights of every member of Congress, the rights that those people have from their congressional districts to be represented in Washington, I think is outrageous. To take away those rights and just have a certain few small number of people, whether it be Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, writing the bills with no input outside. It is something that has got to change and will change. Because with next year, if there is a change as far as control in the House of Representatives, you're going to see an open process where bills actually go to their subcommittees. You have hearings. You have bills come to that subcommittee and they have amendments, something that's almost unheard of today in Washington. You know, actually having amendments being put forth. When they go to full committee, hearings, amendments. When we go to the floor of the House, the ability for every member of Congress to actually represent their district, and if they want to change the legislation, to offer an amendment and have a fair up and down vote on those proposals. Something that has to change next year. You're also going to see, I think, a major reduction as far as the spending. That will be a commitment that we will not continue the outrageous increase in spending. I don't know if you're aware, but the discretionary spending at Washington in the last 2 years has increased 84%. Discretionary spending in Washington increasing 84%. And what has happened, that includes the stimulus bill, but the stimulus bill basically raised the baseline for the appropriation bill. So we were on a path like steady increase in the past, a huge jump with the stimulus spending, and now that increase is the new baseline for increase. That is not sustainable. It is going to continue on because of that baseline, and we need to get back to common sense, responsible spending, and make sure that Washington is under control. This is all about the future of our country. It's about our kids, our grandchildren, for them to have an opportunity like we had growing up in this great state, and it's simply not going to be there if, in fact, we allow this outrageous activity and spending, out of control spending, continue in Washington, D.C. And I can assure you that if I'm reelected, that I will be part of the solution of bringing common sense to Washington rather than, and listen to the constituents here. That is something that is so frustrating at the town hall meetings that I'm having, is the sense that no one is listening, that we're just going to go ahead and pass stuff because people in Washington think that they're smarter than you are. And that's not true. The real common sense, the real insights are here rather than inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. So with that, I would ask for your support, anyone from the 4th Congressional District, and look forward to this fall. So, and again, thank the Des Moines Register for your opportunity to be here today.